How do we choose when to share aspects of our identity that might yet be unknown to someone else? Is there such thing as the perfect time to come out? On the first day of my senior year of high school, my best friend Ben, who by that point had accepted that being gay was real for me, told me that I should probably share this information with my parents. I agreed. Somehow I got into my head that I should do this before my 18th birthday. But when? At the time, I was driving the Garden State Parkway back and forth to where I used to live to finish high school, and those, what you call them, toll buckets, I guess, sometimes had a stray pink triangle or silence equals death sticker on them. Almost 2 weeks before my birthday, I was finishing dinner with a friend, and the note inside my fortune cookie read, "You will soon be crossing the great waters." And during my next commute, my Garden State Parkway toll bucket had not just one, but 2 pink triangles. May 5th, 1993, I figured my time had come. We at CBST love to talk about liminality. If you're here and you're new, you're going to learn about liminality a little tonight, but over time. Liminality is that sense of in-betweenness in space and time. It often feels extra holy. Perhaps in Yiddish, in a sort of mundane way, you could adopt nicht dahin, nicht daher, like neither here nor there, or maybe we could actually say both here and there, all at the same time. Pesach, when we mark our collective coming out as a people, is the quintessential liminal experience in our most ancient stories. The time from the 10th plague to crossing the sea itself, arriving at Mount Sinai 6 weeks later, so many in-betweens. Where is the exact moment when freedom begins? This is a liminal time of year on the American secular calendar. The New Year is approaching. The days between Christmas and New Year's Day are akin to Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of Sukkot or Pesach. Not quite full holidays, but maybe not quite ordinary days either. The week here, of course, not here, but this week in December, of course, has more of a secular and Christian flair and a generous dose of consumerism, I would say. But many people are on skeleton schedules. Some people are traveling. Some are anxious about making plans, and some are anxious about already having too many plans. People are reuniting with friends they haven't seen for a while, with all the likelihoods of conflicts and the possibilities of reconciliation that those reunions can bring. Some, myself included, are focusing on thoughtfully asking for and giving end-of-the-year gifts to causes that they care about. And as these December days approach their end, we will be dropped into the year 2026 and, Seinfeld style, may wonder how long wishing someone a Shana Tova is socially acceptable once January comes. Scholars often refer to the biblical story of Joseph as a novella. So if you're keeping up with the weekly Parshiot, you probably know this, that they're page-turners. Each of them ends with a cliffhanger. Last week, we picked up right before Joseph was summoned back to Pharaoh's palace after leaving prison. This week, we pick up 18 verses before Joseph comes out to his brothers as, well, himself. To say that the path to this reunion is a simple, linear path would be the understatement of this last Shabbos of the year. If you track Joseph's movements throughout his life, you see that here's someone who kind of dreams that he's up and above his family, and then is thrown down into the pit by his brothers, lifted out of the pit, yet brought down to Egypt, elevated in Potiphar's household, and then thrown down into a prison before being lifted up into Pharaoh's court. Joseph, on the verge of revealing himself to his brothers, is not near the end of a linear journey. In fact, the name of the Parsha is a name that rings of liminality. Vayigash means he approached. He's not here, he's not there, but somewhere in the approaching is in the in-between. And in this case, the Torah is talking about Joseph's brother, Judah, his older brother, the same Judah who is associated with the actions that led Joseph to be sold into slavery in ancient Egypt. And these first verses of Vayigash are a teshuvah story for the ages. Judah knows that this favored child thing that's been a theme of the Torah up until now is still alive and well in his father Jacob's psyche. But Judah has let that go in favor of protecting his brother Benjamin, whom Joseph, still wearing Egyptian royal drag, has just accused of stealing from Egypt. And this isn't simply a what if I were faced with this scenario kind of teshuvah situation, theoretically, what would I do next time? Judah literally volunteers to give up his freedom right there on the spot to make sure that Benjamin will be safe. Judah has realized that Joseph's behaviors as a child never justified the actions of his older brothers, and Judah has accepted his father's faults. Regardless of the faults of others, Judah will commit to being the best person he can be. And finally, because Judah presumably doesn't know that the person he's talking to is Joseph, the scene comes across as a controlled experiment that Judah passes with flying colors. Now we see a Judah who, at his core, proves that he would put himself in danger before letting something happen to his brother. Maybe before putting anyone else in danger. I like to imagine that Judah's teshuvah is so complete that he didn't even think twice about how to respond to Joseph and simply said, practically on reflex, take me instead of Benjamin. I'm not sure if there's ever a perfect time to come out, but in this case, perhaps Joseph's long game with his brothers affected a different kind of revelation. Judah shared in a way that was raw and vulnerable who he had become, not describing who he was, but simply being it, a changed person. And that was so over the top in a good way that Joseph was set up to say, Ani Yosef, ha'od avichai, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? In the very next verse, Joseph asks his brothers to approach him. That same word from the title of this Parshat. And what do? They do. They approach. They come closer. They're kind of in that space. So consider this physically, if you're picturing the scene, but also imagine it emotionally. Judah approaches Joseph in the very first verse of the Parshat, willing to sacrifice himself for Benjamin. A few verses later, Joseph has the room cleared of everyone except for his family of origin, tells them who he is, and then asks his brothers to approach, which they do. The night I came out to my parents, our conversations progressed to such topics as safer sex and grandchildren. And the next night, when I came home from school, my father sat me down and said, Jace, you told us something very important to you last night, so I think I should do the same for you. And he told me that when our family friend, his dear colleague and friend Shiri, had died by suicide a few years earlier, the loss was actually much harder for him than he had let my sister or me believe. And that led to some more conversations about that. But kind of a boundary was dropped there. 24 hours before I had said something to my father that made him feel extra connected. 24 hours before I had said something to my father that made him feel extra connected to me, and now he had reciprocated in kind. We are a congregation that includes many people who love paying careful attention to those in-between times, the liminality of time and space, and we are also a congregation that includes many people for whom the biblical psalms and their interpretations are so dear. The final verse of the 121st Psalm, Adonai yishmor tzetcha uvoacha me'ata ve'ad olam, the Eternal will guard your coming out and your returning home from now and forever, does not suggest that there is a perfect time to come out, but rather suggests that the Holy One is with us at every coming out, in every transition, at every homecoming, no conditions, protection so constant that we may not even realize it's there. Whether we're coming out and hoping to fit in, coming out and wanting to be acknowledged as unique, validating the fullness of humanity, whatever it is, the when may be less important than the how. Judah and Joseph's interaction give us an example of how admitting vulnerability, how self-reflection, and how speaking the truth really allow us to take steps toward one another, that Vayigash, that constant approaching, to be aware of the Holy One protecting us on our journeys with and through each other. Shabbat Shalom.